Turn on the slideshow. There it is. Okay, I'm Tai Edwards. You've been seeing me all day. Here we are. All right, so you've taken the class, and now I'm going to go over so that you're ready for the final exam, which is everything you're going to do between now and August and November. All right? The good news is it's pass-fail. Yeah? Okay, no too soon for the jokes? Okay. All right, so let's just go over why we were here and what we were planning on doing. So these were our 3 goals for the conference, all right? So we wanted to educate you, right? So educate Kansans on important legislative and electoral issues in 2022. I think we've done that. These are not all of the important issues, right? These are some of the important issues. Some of the things we didn't have time for today, and there are things that many of you are going to be active for between now and November that aren't part of this list. But this is some of the things that we could get information on. We wanted to empower you that you can take action to address these issues. You can do it in your home community. You can do it amongst your friends. You can do it by running for office yourself. You can do a lot of things, and they make a difference. We know this with research, and we know this with our history. And then lastly, the most important thing is nothing successful happens on your own. And it's not fun to do it on your own, all right? You can do this with others. So collaborate. You can do it in official ways, in organizations. That's what I do through Women for Kansas. You can do it with other alliances and groups we've heard about today, or you can just do it with your friends, all right? You can do this with other people, and that makes it more joyful and more successful. All right, so I'm going to review really quickly what we heard from the people that joined us today, all right? So we can remember the things that were said, not just how wonderful we felt while they were saying them, which is how I felt while it was happening. All right, so for Erin Thompson, right, our first session was about the amendment. So Erin told us to vote no on August 2nd, and she reminded us that it's for Kansans, our region, and our nation that we do this. This is an act of your patriotism, okay? And you should exercise it as if that is what is at stake, okay? Because there are people who will die if we don't succeed at this, all right? There is going to be costs. All right, also, I wanted to remind everyone that voting no on the amendment keeps abortion regulation and contraception regulation as it is right now today in Kansas. Right, so the vote no keeps the status quo that we're in currently. All right, so any radical ads about crazy things that could happen is not the case. So if they're living now, they can live on August 3rd and January 2nd in the world that will be created. She challenged us to talk to at least 10 people. Barbara, as you remember, challenged us to speak to everyone that we see, whether it be in a restroom stall, at your hair appointment, or wherever it is, between now and then. And Kansans for Constitutional Freedom has resources if you're looking for those. Erin is working with that group. There are other groups that have resources, but remember, that's one place where you can go. April Holman from the Alliance for Healthy Kansas reminded us that when it comes to Medicaid expansion, you can join her group, right? You can participate in their events like the Walk the Gap campaign. Summer and fall are being scheduled. She talked about educating our social circles. She talked about writing letters to the editor or op-eds about CanCare. If you do it right, you could appear in a News We Can Use Women for Kansas newsletter. You're welcome. Yeah. Yeah, the Kansas Reflector. Women for Kansas, as you may know, is among some of the groups that put op-eds in that wonderful piece of journalism. Share on social media, and then before the next legislative session, she said, reach out to your elected officials in the state legislature. And let's remember something else we talked about today. Even if you disagree on everything with your elected official, or even if they never clear out their voicemail box and they never answer their emails, we have to use the system that we have in order for it to work. And sometimes the documentation of what we care about is as important as them being convinced by us, even if they won't change their mind. We need documentation of what's important to us. So they cannot say, well, none of my constituents ever contacted me about this, right? We need to use the process as it stands. All right, then Christina Haswood, one of our wonderful Indigenous women representatives in the Kansas legislature, she challenged us to send good representatives to the legislature in our August and November voting, right? She's like, our work is easier when I have colleagues who want to work on it. She also encouraged us to vote no on the August 2 constitutional amendment. And she said to make sure our policies and practices care for children and families after birth, especially for people of color. And we need to remember that in those policies that we support and the candidates that we support. Sedgwick County Commissioner Sarah Lopez focused on mental health in the county and the challenges that that is presenting. She talked about how important it is to have a pathway for social workers to be employed in the county. She talked about how we need to collaborate with the state to open a mental health hospital here, which sounds like it's on track to perhaps be a reality, and be open to all ideas related to mental health care in the county. And then she also talked about increasing the pay for county employees, which probably relates to that social worker lack of employment in the county. And this is maybe the most important point on that slide. You need to voice your support for those things to the commissioners themselves and to your neighbors, right? So that they know that these are the important political issues in the county. And as you know, right, we live in a multi-tiered governmental system in our society, and the place where you focus on some of the issues that are important to you might not be all levels of government, right? So if mental health is something that's important for you, if police reform is something that's important to you, you're gonna have to focus on your city and county rather than your federal elected officials, right? So think about that strategically. Governor Laura Kelly was here. Remember how fun that was? Yeah, that was a great lunch. All right, so some of the things that she said to us. We've come too far, which should be a T-double-O, sorry. We've come too far to go back to the Brownback agenda. And she said, do not give up the fight. And I think it's always good to remember, right? Sometimes in 4 years you can get bogged down and forget what happened 4 years ago or 8 years ago, but remember that. The priorities she shared with us, right, related to the economy, especially in rural areas, childcare for all, workforce development, connecting everyone to high-speed internet, supporting small businesses, and expanding Medicaid. I will say Women for Kansas tried to support local small businesses in terms of where we held this venue and in terms of our audiovisual work that is being done in this entity. So these are things that we can do in other choices that we make. And then she also challenged us to build bridges and not to burn them, right? We are gonna have to live near our neighbors forever. So we gotta remember that. As I always implore people, just talk bad about people behind their backs, right? Like, you know, when you're talking to their face, talk about what we have in common. Okay. All right, then organizing for political action. Barbara Bollier challenged us, right? Prairie Roots is her organization. So she said, if you want change, you have to change who is in elected office. And she challenged us to focus on who is representing us, right? And she also said to think strategically about certain powerful legislators. Even if you don't live in those districts, how can you support the people who do or the people running for office who do? Vote no on the constitutional amendment. Again, she reminded us that you have to get involved and doorsteps are wherever you are standing, right? Except for maybe this room, right? Except we've all heard it, except for maybe this space. Help people understand that a progressive candidate will be able to implement the policies that they want, right? So talk to people about what they need, right? What needs to change for them specifically to improve their situation. Then run for office yourself, right? Yes. I mean, the worst that can happen is you don't get elected and then you're doing what you're doing now, right? I mean, that's, right? It's not a failure. You're just, you don't have to do that extra work, right? But that presents people with choices. And it also shows other people in your community that it can be done and that you're not afraid. Recruit someone else to run for office. That's fun. Like, this is important. I'm not going to do it, but you should. No? No? To be fair, it worked on Laura Kelly, so it can work on someone else. And then she wants you to, of course, support Prairie Roots with your time and funds. Those are things that you can also do. If you want to do it in a framework, use her framework. And then, of course, Davis challenged us, Davis Hammett with Loud Light, challenged us to bring people in and build community. I often tell my students that the solutions to most problems are relationships, right? And so this is one of the ways we can help solve the problems that we're facing, including with people who may often vote totally differently than ourselves, right? Relationships are important. If you show up for people, they will show up for you. That's absolutely important in everything that we do, right? Not just in politics. But that's also allyship. That's also advocating for others, right? That's building equity into your life and your community. And then we need to focus on building up democracy. Teach people why it's worth getting engaged, maybe even how you've gotten engaged, and how you can translate that into power. So what do you do? Why do you do it? And how has it worked for you? Share that with others, especially if they're new to this work. And then I love this, Davis, thank you for saying this. Remember, we are winning. We just have to translate it into the political elected officials who are in our community. And remember, Laura Kelly was someone we all helped elect, right? That was a victory in many contexts. And that has saved us from some things that could have happened in the last 4 years. Okay. All right, so organizing for political action. Liberal City Commissioner Janeth Vasquez, wonderful to join us, educate people, right? She talked about how she had to tell people, what does the city commission do, right? A lot of people don't know. I mean, more people are engaged with who's running for president than who runs for their city commission, right? But the person who impacts them the most is the smaller office, right? Those are the things that we've got to convince people. Meet people where they are. This is what we should always be doing, right? Remind that you need to speak in ways people can understand and about things that are important to them. Speak up, right? She said you need to speak up for yourself and your community. For her, her journey started by going to a city commission meeting because of an issue that was important to her. And that's often how it starts, because then you're not afraid of that space, right? She went into that space, and then she's like, this can be my space. And that's where she is now. Don't let intimidation get to you. And she said, if you want to run, run, right? And then you can ask for help for people to support you in doing that work. Then last but not least, we just heard wonderfully from Dorothy. And I will say, as someone who's had to seek out mental health care for my own climate despair, I appreciate that others are making this their career, right? That this is your work. So she challenged us to attend a wealth day. You can sign on to the resilientkansas.org. I don't know if petition, contract, sign on to it. That's what you should do. And on the Climate and Energy Project website, I found it, and you can find the directions to make public comment to the Kansas Corporation Commission before July 8th on the energy efficiency policy she just discussed with us. And then you could become a Kansas climate community organizing for resilience and equity, which is a mouthful. So you can just be a core member, right? That's easier to say. And take the core voter pledge. And voter-to-voter organizing is one of the ways you can sort of address not only the climate change issue, but all of the issues that we've talked about today. And I will say, and I teach this to my students, everything that we get wrong is worse in the context of climate change, right? All the inequities are magnified in climate collapse. And our children are gonna judge us for this. This is gonna be the thing. And it connects to all the other things. Okay, so really quickly, those are the folks that spoke, and I'm gonna give you a framework to empower you as you leave. All right, so a framework for 2022 and beyond. So someone we've heard about at today's event was Stacey Abrams. So in February 2021, when I was enjoying never leaving my home and both educating my children by day and doing my job by night, I listened to a Stacey Abrams talk, which she did with the University of Pennsylvania in February, and it's kind of about her political organizing, et cetera. And one of the things that she said in there, and she encouraged people to think about, is she said, when you're in activism, you should focus on the path to what should be, okay? And she said the path to is what you're working on, and the what should be is what you're imagining. And if you're at all getting closer to what should be, you're doing the right thing, right? So you can't think in absolutes, right? And in that talk, she talked about, is Medicaid for all important? Yes. And she's like, I live in a state, as we all do in Kansas, where we're still working on Medicaid for some, right? So we have to remember that there might be these policy dreams that we have, but we have to get closer to that goal, which might not be all the way to that goal, which is painful, but this is the work that we do, especially in states like hers and ours. All right, so why do we do this? Okay, so the future. I'm a mother, right? I'm doing it for my kids, but I'm doing it for the people whose parents are too busy and they want it for their kids. It's all the kids. It's not just my kids. And I will say in my work, in my academic work, the societies that are the best at this are the ones that care the most about lineage, past, and future. And we're not good at that. So we have to care about the future. All right, so another quote from Stacey Abrams in that same talk from February 2021. She says, I don't think you solve a problem for yourself. I think if you see a problem, you should solve the problem for the person who comes behind you, who may not have the resources. And you might be dead, before the benefits of that policy are felt. And that's still a reason to do it. Okay, so she focuses on moving forward rather than winning. As you know, in the United States, our policies and our politics are often characterized like sports. There are people that win and lose. There are people that are ahead and behind. And there's all these statistics that are nonsense that you have to listen to as you go through the process, which is like most sporting events. So instead of focusing on winning, it's a process, right? This is what democracy feels like. You have to work with people sometimes that, again, that you talk not nicely about behind their back, but you're gonna have to work with them to move forward. So you need to understand that they are the opposition, they're not the enemy. All right, these are still people. And people come to their politics based on their own set of experiences, which probably aren't the same as your experiences. And everyone likes simple things. Everyone likes easy answers, and everybody wants a man to come save them. But it's not gonna happen, right? And we know this because we dated. But we have to save ourselves, and we're gonna do it by working together. Right? So that's how it's going to work. All right, and I always, whenever you're struggling, like just think of the alternative. Well, the alternative is if you take no action, there will be no change. And that's unacceptable. And even if I don't reap the benefits of the actions that I take, I'm not gonna die saying I didn't try hard enough. And then lastly, we live in a democracy, right? Which has pros and cons. I like it for the most part. But democracy demands engagement. It only works when we participate. And I know that in some ways I feel like I kind of came of age in a time where people liked to not be engaged. They sort of liked the idea that it worked, right? Like, I'm busy, I don't have time, I want to read about something else, right? That's not the way it works. And perhaps we just got out of the habit. And so we have to remember that democracy demands engagement. And one of the things I teach Kansas history, and one of the things that I like to think about is that in a lot of things, historically, Kansas is first. So, I mean, in many things, right? And when I think about the Brownback era, I was ready to face the Trump era because I had already lived in the Brownback era. I'm not kidding you. I mean, I cried more the Brownback re-election night than I did the Trump election night, because I learned from the earlier one to be ready for the next one. And I learned that you just got to get with people, right? And you got to take action, and you might just need to do more. But this is how the process works, right? And so we have to be engaged, and we have to do that work. Okay, so how do we do this? The most important thing, and I'm going to say it again, is you must do this with others. It's the only way to do anything worth doing. And you can do this with the kinds of folks that we invited to speak with you today. So elected officials, right? You can work with the one that's representing you, even if they're not perfect or close to your politics. You can also work with elected officials who don't directly represent you, right? Like, I've worked with Sharice Davids, but I don't live in her district. We can support Jeanette Vasquez and Liberal, even if we don't live in her city, right? You can work with elected officials, even if they're not exactly yours. You can work with organizations and alliances, like many of the groups that we've had here today, including Women for Kansas. You can consume our News We Can Use newsletter, right? It comes right to your email. You can come to events. You can give us your money. You can do all kinds of things for organizations and alliances in our state. You can work with the people in your networks, right? Your friends, the people that go to your religious ceremonies with you, right? The people in your family, the people that you know. And maybe most importantly, you probably should also work with people outside of your networks, right? We need to think about who have we not invited and why haven't we talked to them and what are the reasons. I'm glad speaking of that, I'm glad someone asked Janeth about what does it mean to knock door to door in a neighborhood that you could be viewed as sort of a hostile interloper, right? Like, what does that mean? And we're gonna need to do that work too. Leverage your resources. You have them. You have things that make you powerful in some way, right? And so that might be you have time. That might be you have energy. That might mean you have expertise or funds, or you know someone, or you know something, or you're part of an institution. These things can be leveraged for you and others in your groups. Okay, so think about that. Then it's also really important to remember and savor progress and success. Okay, it's easy to focus on negative things. It's easy to focus on them. But the things that you actually have to hold on tight to sustain you through the work is the success, right? Electing Laura Kelly was a success. And we probably felt mostly relief rather than joy, right? I'm not crying after an election night was how we felt, right? And so you need to, but you have to hold on to them. And however you do that, right? However you remind yourself, this is success. When the anti-trans bills were vetoed, I mean, I felt that. That's a success. The work that I did to help Laura Kelly get elected led to that. Feel it, okay? Savor that. You're gonna not be able to do this every day, right? You're gonna need to do this with rest. Many of you have responsibilities other than this, right? We all are living lives outside of this. Lives that try to take our attention and take our energy, right? And so you have to have rest. And you need to do this with long-term intention, right? This isn't something where there will be, a moment and a date and it'll be fixed and then I don't know what you would do after that. You have to do it with long-term intention. Activism is a lifestyle. Now, I also like to believe that it's seasonal, right? So there are times when you can rest, right? Like an election year is busy. So maybe a non-election year you can do a little bit less, right? Like, so think about it sort of as seasonal work. And then when I talk about long-term intention, again, many of the people here today have talked about running for office, right? There's a lot of chance that you couldn't do worse than some of the people doing it now, right? So, not to use a dating analogy again, but sometimes the bar is in the basement and you can hop right over that low bar. So think about it, and if you can't, who can you support who is, right? And how can you support them? And then the last one I have here is be creative. A lot of times activists have ideas and people around them are like, that's terrible and it'll never work. Well, maybe, but if it's energizing to you, try it. Because at the very least, you're gonna learn what not to do or how to do that thing better, right? I mean, and I'm interested in like some radical things, right? Like if there's a moderate in your district and they can't win a primary, but you think you could mount a write-in campaign, like figure out how the hell to do that, right? Like try things that seem absurd just to see if they work, right? And things might work in one place that don't work in another place, right? There isn't one way to do this. If there was one way to do this, we would just do it that way and it would work, okay? And other people in opposition groups have been pretty creative, right? Including violating the Constitution, making up lies, right? Like, others are creative, so we should be too. And I always hate gaslighting, but you should really not gaslight yourself, right? Like, if you have ideas, try them and use them. All right, so in closing, I want to thank everyone for being here. So at first, I want you to know those vote no signs, we need you to take them, because I had to haul them all here, and they're heavy, and I'd rather not haul them all home. So take as many as you need. If you are like, I'm in a place where I cannot display it, you know what? Your living room is a display space. And those 3 people that see it in the background of your Zoom meetings will appreciate that you have it, okay? So take signs, and if you think you could possibly give any away to friends or family, take them. I mean, take more than one, okay? I want to thank all of our presenters and panelists. They all provided us with wonderful information. They answered our questions generously, and they gave their time, and we really appreciate that. We want to thank our technology. Kent AV has done a wonderful job on our technology. And we want to thank Rolling Hills. They have been so accommodating and helpful in this space, which we've enjoyed being in together. It's been so long since we could be together. I want to thank our Women for Kansas planning team and advertising. TS Designs, Tammy Smith, does all of our digital products, our newsletter. So you've seen Tammy's work all over this room. And of course, we would always welcome your membership and support. You can also just subscribe to our Facebook page or to our News We Can Use newsletter and get all of our events there. I also want to thank all of our contributors, and we had grants from foundations that help support today, which we appreciate. But mostly, I want to thank all of you for coming. This is how we do the work, is we gather and we learn and we move forward. So thank you for coming. And I wanted to let you know that we do have an evaluation form about the conference. So it is at the back of your program if you want to do the physical copy, but you all should have gotten an email right at 4 p.m., which we set to blast you, where you could fill it out online. And the box to drop those evaluations is at the registration table. So if you could give us feedback, we'd really appreciate this. And we'll use that feedback because we usually do these conferences in a governor election year. That's how we usually do them. So the next one would be 4 years from now. Although we have many wonderful events that we do all over the state and on Zoom. And then lastly, we're going to have cocktails on the terrace after this if you can stay with us. And we will have music from Kathy Webb and a group called Lawyers Pulling Strings, which is wonderful. So I want to thank you all for coming. Again, I wanted to remind you, educate, empower, and collaborate. That could be your theme as you go through August 2nd and in November. And we'd love to see you in the future. So thank you.